Thank you, guys. That's pretty cool. Earlier tonight, someone asked me if I was from Flagstaff. I think the appropriate answer is I kind of feel like I am right now. So I feel like I might want to be at some point. You know, you guys, really, the spirit of this community has been something that's always really left a mark on me. I remember the first time I got to come up and see my friends, Danny and the rest of the team at Catula. I'm not sure where they're sitting at right now with the blinding lights in front of me. But, you know, it was just so cool seeing, I think, more than anything, how much everybody here in the community pulls for each other and how strong of a pull that is. And just being connected to Danny and our friends there, then at Catula, you know, now friends at Gore. I just wanted to say to the friends at Gore, the other sponsors for this event, like, thank you guys so much for putting this on. Thank you for just everyone here being open to just the idea of celebrating something as cool as science, and to the history of what this program is, to Greg, to Bonnie, to the rest of the board, to the 28-year history that this program's had. It's absolutely incredible. There are only two things I think that I know for sure right now. One is those dancers are the hardest act ever to follow. And I don't say that often. I don't say that lightly. To the dance crew, I think we were starting to make some plans backstage. We got a couple years until the smallest of you or youngest of you are out of school, but I think we need to go and start doing a road show with this thing. But I'm gonna warm up for you guys next time. I'm gonna be the opening act. So the second thing I know for sure is I am the least educated person that's ever spoken in the 28 years. And I say that humbly, but also too, I mean, it's something that, you know, you look at the astronomers and astronauts and underwater explorers and people going into tombs and, you know, all kinds of crazy stuff. It's amazing. And I started thinking about engineering too, and you know, really engineering solutions and what this theme of the next 10 days here, what that represents. And what that really means to me. You know, obviously, we all have our own association with the word engineering. You know, for many of you, you may be engineers. You may be, you know, and there's so many different types of engineering, right? From civil engineering to structural engineering, biomedical engineering to electrical engineering to, I mean, all over the gamut. But really, I want to kind of chunk it down to the level of realize that every single one of us, we're all engineers. And in a way, anytime that we're faced with a problem and we got to go and come up with a solution, then we are being an engineer. And coming up with that abstract solution, actually, Joey, my friend backstage, he kind of read this definition for me, and he said it's the action of artfully, I think it was creating something or bringing something to life. So the action of artfully bringing something to life, we'll take that. Bringing something to reality. That's engineering. We all do that. And the next really big thing, the first big thing that comes to mind for me when I think of engineers, I think of heroes. In particular, two heroes, in particular my family. My dad, my grandpa. My grandpa was an electrical engineer who back in the 60s for almost for a full year was working as the lead engineer on what kind of became Magnavox's first fax machine. And my dad then sort of followed in his footsteps. You know, it's interesting, my dad, he was really academically, he was not doing too hot when he left high school and went to college, was focused on wrestling and football and kind of followed those same paths a little bit myself, but he got injured and had left school. It's kind of failing out of school. Went in the military straightened him out. He went back to school and went to school and studied electrical engineering. And then completely shifted his mind and went from, kind of like worst to first, taking on one of the hardest degrees that there was to go and take on, but something that was super exciting. And I think him having that mindset of the electrical engineering helped instill in me just this attitude that no matter how big the problem was that we were taking on with figuring out how to adapt things, of how do I do this, how do I do that, we could figure it out. He always, that spirit of engineering was so important in the early goings of my life and still is today. And the last sort of context that I think of is really, we're all too often, all the time, bombarded with, the reality of the major problems that we are facing in the world today. And for generations to come, from, many generations to come, then how are we engineering solutions for that future? And how are we all a part of that? For me, even figuring out how to do something as simple as picking up, a water bottle or a spoon or a fork or any of that. There was, to some degree in the early goings, there's some engineering to kind of do there. Because I used to use a special prosthetic. Don't use anything now, but I used to use prosthetic to go and pick something up. I'd move my shoulder in different ways, and I'd open and close a hook. But it wasn't really natural. It didn't really fit me, the way that I wanted it to. It was also, too, my dad kind of understanding, having that engineering background, he kind of understood the principle that, he would always say, the world's not tailored or set up for Kyle's every need. He's going to have to figure out how to go and do a lot of this stuff on his own. And didn't want to have things to be too complicated. Wanted me to be able to go and figure things out sort of as simply as possible. He knew that mechanical things were going to be far less likely to go and break, and the fewer reliances that I had, then in a lot of regards, the better off I would be. Which was tough in the early goings. For starters, because when I was born, my mom and dad, too, they had no idea I was going to be born with any type of disability. I was born in 1986, so the ultrasound technology was way different then. My mom, had normal checkups, normal ultrasounds, everything up until the day I was born. And then when I was born, there was a lot of confusion and doubt, just fear, frustration, what went wrong, what could go wrong in the immediate goings. Once they sort of ruled out other medical concerns, and they said, it was just in the ensuing kind of weeks, it was kind of just why, why us? Why did this happen? Why Kyle? It was also prior to the days of Google, where you could go and type in the name of a condition and you could go and see other people being successful, living a successful life. So it was really, there was definitely moments where they lost that hope. My family's their true north that they set was really to make things just as normal as possible. And they knew that if they took the focus away from the disability and they put the focus on the ability and the things that I could do, then I would figure stuff out. So like I said, even picking up a spoon or a fork or water bottle or whatever it was, at first I had to go and drop it over and over and over again. If you imagine this to be a spoon, to scoop up the food, it's kind of how I would go and do it now. Then at first, just had to fail at it repeatedly, kind of spilling food all over the place. My dad said, look, he's got to learn how to do it and do this on his own. My mom wanted to jump in. She kind of wanted to do it for me. And my dad's like, he's going to have to do it on his own, or he actually said on TV, he's going to have to do it on his own or starve. I hope he didn't mean it that seriously, but I'm not really sure. And the consequence of that, though, was I did adapt and figure it out. And I know I've already gotten to go and meet a couple friends here in the audience that might have a little bit more of a visually obvious physical disability, something you could go and see on the outside. Something we talked about all the time was that every person on the planet has a disability. It's not just things that you can go and see, but it's every single one of us, right? We all have things. 99.9% of the time, you just can't see it. So it was adapting solutions and figuring stuff out was kind of key, but it was really like, as some of like my friends know here in the audience, like I mentioned, you kind of just figure stuff out. It's amazing how resilient we are to be able to go and adapt. And these are my 3 younger sisters, and my parents' advice was to them, or from doctors, was just, said Kyle needs like playmates. And so I'd run around the house and play with my sisters, and then I'd go to school, and it was really more constricted with the prosthetic arms and legs. And the prosthetics, though, they helped from more of I called them my big arms and big legs too, right? So the technology was way different. These big fiberglass kind of, wooden legs with a buckle to go and collapse the knee. And you've got these arms with straps on the back to go and open and close these hooks. So technology was definitely way different then, and for me, I was able to run around fine without the prosthetics on, but I'd go to school because I felt like I needed to go and wear these things to kind of blend in, to kind of feel normal. It wasn't until it was actually around a month into kindergarten, and it was a show and tell class. It was my turn to do show and tell. And so my teacher had to pick me up out of my seat, and she carried me over to the middle of the circle and set me down in the seat with the other kids, passed me my toy, tried to take the hook on the toy and press a button to go and make a sound with it and show the other kids, and I can't do it, and I drop it on the ground. And I was like really embarrassed, and I wanted to run out of the room, but I'm locked here in this with the legs. I needed somebody to help stand me up. And the teacher passed me the toy again. I still couldn't do it. My mom's watching through a window. The parents were invited to go and watch their kids do show and tell. And I came home that night, told my mom about it, and told her I wanted to come to school without my big arms and big legs, so I'm going to stay. She called the teacher, and the teacher said, all right, let me, I'm definitely okay with it. If that's what Kyle wants to do, if that's what you want to do. She said, why don't you wait to bring Kyle to the second half of school tomorrow? And she would talk to the kids in the first half. And apparently it took like 2 or 3 hours to like explain to the kindergarten class like why Kyle had arms and legs yesterday, but he's not going to today. So that's a pretty big concept for a 5-year-old to wrap their head around, right? Like, whoa, okay. Is Johnny not gonna have arms and legs tomorrow? Am I not gonna have arms and legs tomorrow? But we all got through it. I came to school, played with the kids, and they told the teacher at the end of the day that they like me better like that. And that was the last time I ever wore them. So it is something, though, I think that is an interesting thought or discussion is like, sometimes with engineering solutions, when is the engineering too much? When is it not enough? And are we going to go and engineer away things that are frankly intrinsic to the human experience? Do we fully in the future engineer away any type of like suffering, right? Where we get sort of the Wall-E world. What does that look like in the future? And I think about this stuff a lot. I'm a big philosophy dork. And I think there's one thing that's really like sort of like a lot of my personal philosophies have been based around. It's something that was said in 1931 by a guy named Alfred Korzybski. He said, the map is not the territory. So what he means by that really is a lot of things, and I definitely don't have time for that tonight to go and jump into this and get everybody home at a decent hour here. But what he means by that is if territory is whatever reality is, we all walk around with our own maps explaining what that is. And there's 7 billion of us walking around with our own map explaining what the reality is, right? The problem is, and all I got to go and do is you can turn on the news for 30 seconds and you can go and see that every one of us believes that our reality is the right one. And very few of us are willing to go and admit the fact that like the map is our map, the maps are not the territory. They're just maps. Now, some maps are more useful than other maps. If we go and take a map of Flagstaff 50 years ago, it's going to look way different than a map today. If we go and, take a map and we only have an hour to go and construct it, it's not going to be a very effective, accurate map. So really, the usefulness of the map to the territory is how accurate it is. Now, to take it a little further, I think that when we say that we know something, for sure we know something, we immediately lose it. We lose the territory. Because knowing something creates a limitation, sort of creates a constraint. I know I can do this, I know I can't do this. It's, there were, like I said, when I was born, a lot of confusion and doubt, and doctors and other people would say, to my parents, we know you're probably going to have to go and take care of Kyle forever. And other people would say, we know that it'll work out, he'll be okay. And their sort of not knowing, being open to discovery, being open to being surprised, was a big part of what led to the development to get to the other side, to be able to have a pretty awesome, fun, fulfilling life of getting to travel around the world now and getting to go and get other people fired up about stuff. So a lot of times though, if for instance, there were doctors that knew it would be that I would want to use prosthetics my whole life, so that it was best to amputate my feet. I have feet, 3 toes in each foot. And it's actually kind of my feet end up being super useful in different things, whether it's jiu-jitsu and grabbing a hold of somebody they can't get away, or a bunch of other things. I'll use my feet to play video games, Xbox. My toe, it's called my right foot here, it's I'll sit the controller in between there, and I call that my trigger finger toe, so. And it's my buddy, Jeff, recently commented, and he said, I just I'll set a drink in there in my wheelchair, and it's my cup holder. There's so many different utilities there that happen that we didn't even know could have existed. But people that knew it was the right move to go and do that, then they kind of create a limitation, a constraint. Now, in the world of science and engineering, it's a difficult thing because we have to know things. We got to be able to believe in something if we're going to go after it. And that's not what I'm saying, that we go and give up our beliefs, but we give up what we believe, but we are open to discovery. And I want to point out a few other key people in my life that had that mentality and what it looks like to kind of compare and contrast that. My football coach was one of the most amazing people that I've ever entered in my life. I'm a wrestling coach. But Coach Tom Shy, when I played football, there was zero physical evidence that I'd be able to play football or any sport. Nothing. He was frankly crazy for letting me try. He shouldn't have. There's no way. I would have questioned it right now. I'm in the ground, I'm going to get trampled by these way bigger kids. They're wearing cleats. There's a lot of other dangerous things associated with that. It's a really bad idea. Someone should go back in time and tell them it was such a bad idea. The way I'd tackle people, too, is I'd take my helmet and smash it into the guy's shins as hard as I could. So, the head injury stuff might explain a lot of things now, but maybe some of my bad ideas that then Danny and other friends go and help me go and do. But what happened was with Coach Shy and playing football, my mom called him up and she said, my son's got a disability, he wants to come out and he wants to play football. Who knows what Coach Shy was doing at the time? He could have been distracted doing his laundry, or he's like, sure, bring him out, we'll go and see what he can do. I came out to the tryouts. I don't think he had a clue what type of disability I had, right? I was in the wheelchair. I jumped out of my chair, and the first thing that we did was just bear crawl sprints, and he was like, do you want to do it in your chair? And I was like, no, and I just jumped out and just started running, just took off bear crawl sprints as fast as I could. I'm doing the shuttle run stuff back and forth, spinning around all over, figuring after this performance, they're definitely going to make me the quarterback on the team, chose number 8 to wear my jersey because it was my dad thought it was actually because it was his high school football number, and it had nothing to do with that. It was just because it was Troy Aikman, an awesome quarterback. In the first Leading up to the tryouts, even leading up to the season, actually, there was a big debate in our community. Grew up in Georgia, most of my life in Georgia, and we just moved down to Georgia when this sort of whole event and desire to play football unfolded. And leading up to that too was the toughest year of my life. 10 years old, I was becoming most self-aware about the disability and really concerned about how that was going to impact the rest of my life. It was am I ever going to have a normal life, normal job, or live on my own? Mom and dad going to have to take care of me forever? Probably 95% of it was you saw in the video with Bumble and dating, whatever, find a girlfriend or wife or family someday or things like that. I didn't have any answers to those questions at that time. At 10 years old, it was really the toughest year of my life. And got to a point where I was ready to nearly give up on my life. I'd lost so much of that hope. And, football and thankfully Coach Shy and just kind of fate, luck, all of those things, whatever we want to call it, lining up, it just worked out that he fought for me to go and have a chance against a 7-member board. There were 3 people that voted for me, 3 people that voted against me, and he had to persuade a final 7th vote to go and give me a chance to play. And that set my life, I'm certain, on a different path. The first snap that I took in practice, the guy had no idea how to go and block me, so I had no idea what I was doing. He told me to play nose guard, defensive line, right? So guy across from me is got to block me, and he just stood straight up. I figured that was my chance. I just dove under his legs and knocked my helmet into the quarterback's legs, knocked him over in first play, got the sack. So came... Came home that night and I was told my dad, I was made the sack first play. He was out of town on a business trip, so I called him up, you're not going to believe it, made the sack first play. I think I'm done with youth football. I'm going straight to the NFL now. It kind of was one of those things, going to be true. I was pretty good for my position. The defensive line and offensive line, the whole point is to get lower than your opponent, and nobody was going to get lower than me, right? So... so again, compare and contrast that though, I spend a lot of time now traveling in the airports. Have some pretty funny airport stories. But one of my all-time favorites is kind of a pretty simple one, but it's kind of funny. There was a lady who was boarding a flight. She worked for the airline I was flying with right after the night after I'd done an interview on Larry King. And she was really excited, and we took a picture together, and she's I'm posting this on Facebook, my profile picture, you can wrestle and you can climb mountains and do everything. It's so amazing, so inspiring. And then her next question was, do you need help getting to your seat? And I told her, I was no, it's fine. I'll jump out of my chair and I'll go and walk. And she was shocked. She was no, you're in a wheelchair. You don't understand. You can't walk. And I was wait, lady, did you watch anything on the video there? Pretty sure there aren't total handicap accessibility up Aconcagua, but it was interesting. Kind of went in this argument back and forth in the way that she wanted to she was persistent that she wanted to go and help. And sometimes I've learned it's easier just to kind of let people do their thing. So, I told her, I was all right, go ahead and help, and I'll be right behind you. And the way she wanted to go and help is this special chair, aisle chair that helps people that need it. It's awesome. And for me, don't, but she turns around and it straps your legs in, your waist in, your chest in, then chair to go down the aisle of the plane. And so I always call it a Hannibal Lecter chair. And I told her, I was go ahead and grab the chair, I'll be right behind you. And so she did, and she turned around and she's unbuckling the chair, and I just grabbed my book bag and I just ran past her. It was a little rocky getting over that at first, but we kind of, we made amends, and I think. So, in another, contrast, right? I told you, playing practice game in football was all well and good, but, before the first real game I played, and it was our jamboree game, big jamboree game, you know, and all this. I wasn't the starter. I was a backup, but I was hopeful I was going to go and get in the game and get that playing time. And the opposing coach, he talked to my coach before the game started, as the coaches sometimes do, and they have conversations, and he said, the opposing coach said, you know, look, I know it's really cool, you got this handicapped kid on your team playing football, it's awesome, I respect that. He's like, but don't worry, when you put him in the game, if you put him in the middle, I'm not going to run the ball anywhere near the middle, I'll just run the ball to the outsides. And so my coach brings me out of the warm-up, he goes and brings me over, and he goes and says to the other coach, he says, why don't you tell Kyle the same story that you just told me? And he does, and after that he says, I dare you to test him. I was already nervous enough going into this moment, and the running back on the other team too. I was 11 years old, weighed 65 pounds. This kid is 6'3", beard, biceps, 260. Zero chance this kid's 11 years old, by the way. And they hand the ball off to him on the very first play. It comes crashing through my line, and the moment I remember making contact, held on for dear life, we brought him down. It was that very first play that came at me, and that moment I know was that first real true dose of competitive contribution and a sense of purpose and aliveness, and so many things even that I've never even talked about. If you look at the foot pads in this leading up to this, the arm pads that my dad made to go and figure out how could he even go and do that and be on the football field to go and do it. We're engineered. Sometimes you just got to engineer stuff out of nothing, and it's born out of that imagination. And that imagination is born out of our just creativity. I personally think that creativity is born out of just our aliveness and passion for solving the problem in the first place. But a lot of times, though, repeatedly, so many different things. I went, from football to wrestling, and still had to go and engineer all these solutions to go and figure out how am I going to go and wrestle and take the guy down and all this stuff. It was a long period of how am I going to go and grab hold of somebody, and all this get my grips down and be on top and bottom, all of these things. And I lost a lot. That was really bad when I started. I don't think anyone realized how bad I was, because the funny thing is, and then later on in my wrestling career, they were accusing me of having an unfair advantage. But I don't think they realized how bad it was when I started. I lost every match for a year and a half, 35 times in a row. Hated it. Did not want to come out and do it again. In the season. I lost every match in 6th grade, did not want to come out and wrestle in 7th grade. But it was no different, too. Even something as simple as, taking and putting on the sock for the first time. You guys have been awesome, but I don't think you're going to sit here while it takes 45 minutes for me to put these socks on, because that's how long it took the first time. It was, even when I was, most things my mom and dad would encourage me to go and do and figure out on my own when I was younger, but then some things it was just easier for my mom to go and help with, and she wanted me to not necessarily even think about the disability, right? That was a huge contribution that she made in my life too, by the way. I don't want to overlook that. As a big science dork, I'm also a big Star Wars dork, and I know I'm probably not the only person in here. And she pulled the ultimate Jedi mind trick on me, of you're not disabled. Cool, I'm not disabled. Because she just didn't let me think about it, right? But it was doing things like putting on the socks helped, and helped me not think about it. But it came a time when I needed to go and do it on my own. I wasn't delusional in thinking that all of my 15-year-old friends had got dressed by their mom before they went to school. Maybe just some of them. But so losing the first 35 matches, putting the sock on for the first time. When I first started lifting weights too, we used to strap ropes around my arms and do that. I lifted maybe 5 pounds total on each arm. Each step along the way, and there's so many other things too. Countless other things. And other things too that aren't even necessarily things, just physical things, like starting a business. I opened a gym in Atlanta in 2008, and it's No Excuses CrossFit. It's before everybody opened a CrossFit gym, and no, but it was amazing, and I still have the gym today, and some way better people managing it are managing the gym than me. I was a really bad manager at the gym. But I had the creative passion to go and get it started, and I've realized that's a big strength of mine. It's just to bring that energy to activate something and then turn it over to smarter people to run it. But with the gym, there were many nights when I was first started that I was sleeping at the gym. You know, I have to deal with like threatening text messages, or semi-threatening text messages at least, from like the guy, you know, like the contractors or painters and things like that, because I couldn't pay him. You know, have to engineer solutions to go and deal with the financing, to go and deal with like making this guy be comfortable with waiting a couple extra hours, you know? So all of these things, you know, they require that. And there's always a moment of breakthrough, but there's like with engineering in general, I don't want to like overlook the idea of like failure is inextricably linked to it. And I think when we're like from here to here, like wherever we're trying to go, a lot of times we just don't want to deal with whatever that middle chunk of failure is. I now, after kind of really going through this pattern enough times, realize that middle chunk of failure is inextricable from any big goal that we take on. So I just want to get it done with as quick as possible. You know, like my recent big passion has been photography and like videography. I wanted to take 30,000 really bad photos, so I could get to the 31,000th that's like awesome. And, you know, for the last few months, I've been doing that obsessively. But like putting the sock on for the first time, went and scoured through the house to find a tool that I could go and do it, because my mom and dad were watching my sisters play softball at a local park, and I begged them to come home and help me get dressed, and they wouldn't, because my best friend Joey, who's sitting backstage, I think, he's been my best friend since we were 11. He's my business partner now, but Joey, well, he's still my best friend too, but I guess I should specify that. But like, he was coming in like a couple of minutes, and he's gonna go and pick me up, and I'm sitting at home, I don't have any socks on, you know, sitting at home, no socks, sweatpants, t-shirt. I wanted to go and put on a nicer shirt, some jeans, like put on my socks. So I went and found a tool that I could go and use. And that was like such a critical thing. It's like this delusional belief of engineering, like my dad would always say, like there's always a tool, there's always a way. I think it was, maybe I'll get this wrong, I hope not, but like Archimedes said, like give me a lever long enough and I'll move the world, right? It's like, that is the essence of it. There's always a tool, there's always a way. We just have to get over our cynicism enough to go and find it, right? We got to go and get over, like when I hung up the phone with my mom and I can't convince her to come home, and now I'm like, like I got 30 seconds to be really ticked off at her, and like, 29 seconds to be really sad. But Joey's going to be here in an hour, so I don't have time to go and lament. I got to deal with this situation. So I went and found a paperclip. And for anybody that's ever used a paperclip, you know that you can reshape paperclips to go and form things. So I went and reshaped it with my mouth. I went and formed like a sort of a shape of a fishing hook. I stuck that in the sock. For 30 minutes for that first sock, just, you know, saying some words I won't repeat here, like pulling this thing on, pouring sweat all over this stupid sock. Finally got this thing on. Next one took 15 minutes, cut my learning curve in half. Look at that, one time. And then, you know, but it's 45 minutes to put the socks on. I stuck the paperclip inside the zipper and realized I could zip my pants up for the first time. And realized I didn't have time for the button. Definitely didn't have time to engineer a solution for that. So I just threw on the shirt over top. I was sweating through the shirt, thinking like I have to take everything off, shower, put it all back on. Definitely didn't have time for that. But also realized that the shirt could go and conceal the button. And so like 99% of the time I still don't button my pants today. Like, bet nobody noticed. When I go and, the reason why I'm standing here without the socks on, know now, you know, when I go and put the socks on, don't use the paperclip. There were a lot of other intermediary tools to, you know, put this, you know, to put the sock on. But sometimes, like that is, I think, you know, a lot of times in our solutions, especially in society, we look at things through a very myopic lens. And for the dancers in the room, that just means a really dumb kind of lens. It means like really short-sighted. We only look at things like very in this moment, like this is like good or bad. Like take recycling, for instance. The technology to go and produce and make just recycling energy efficient was not energy efficient at first. There's nothing efficient about it. So then, anybody who's going to go and fight against recycling then would go and have the case of like, no, this is stupid. It's spending more energy than it's helping create. We're doing more harm than good, putting more pollutants in the world and all those things. But they don't understand necessarily is the learning curve that it takes to go and do it, that which is required by investment and time, repeatedly going in and out and like failing on something over and over again. I didn't put that sock on for the first time in 5 seconds. And you didn't see the tons of tools in between that had to be developed and cultivated to then go and figure out how to go and do it, to then realize I didn't need the tool at all. That learning curve is inextricable to our lives. First time we go and do anything, at first we're going to fail repeatedly. But then we get better. We just don't look at that as a global society enough. The long tail, the long end of how long it takes to go and create sustainable change and progress, and the investment that needs to come in on the short end that doesn't always make sense. We have to switch our paradigm to survive as a species, I believe. It's a bigger part of like the deeper message that I care about now, that I want to go and like give my life to that cause. It's because on the other side of that, we just don't have any idea what is possible. We don't. Writing a book called No Excuses is kind of like one of the worst ideas I've ever had. Because then you go and realize, like, you're never over your excuses. Every one of us, we have tons of excuses. There are still tons of fears and excuses that I have that I try to continually go and want to confront. It's a mountain that we never, ever, ever reach the summit of. But it's so critical to go and take those ones that are right there in front of us right now. If all of us were to go and think of the biggest excuse in our life that's keeping us from living the life that we're capable of, what would that be, and how different would life be if we took that on? The biggest excuse of all, though, I think, is a lack of imagination. And that's where, on the other side of it, when I first started wrestling and doing those things, weightlifting, all that stuff, parents were saying it was borderline child abuse that my parents were making me do it. My dad tricked me into sticking around and keep going. He told me, he said, look, I want to tell you, I didn't win a single match my first year wrestling either. And he said, very few people ever win a match their first year in wrestling, but everybody wins a match their second season because you're going to find somebody who it's their first season, so you'll beat them. And then it became true, that power of suggestion. Like that first year I won a match and, then got better, a lot better. By the time I was a senior in high school, was beating a lot of kids and went to the States and the Nationals, won 36 varsity matches, and placed top 12 in the nation in my weight class. In the weightlifting, I went, from lifting the 5 pounds, 10 pounds total on each arm. My favorite lift was on my back doing a butterfly press. I learned to go and, use my body in different ways. Ended up doing in 2009, did a modified bench press of 420 pounds. Not something I necessarily recommend trying. Couldn't move my left shoulder for about a week after that, so I'm a little more longevity focused now, but the reason why I bring it up, though, is like I would have never imagined those possibilities to be reality. At the time, that was not in my map. But it was all along, it was part of the territory. All along, it was part of reality. All along, it existed as a possibility. Just my map, not even any one of our maps, my parents' map, if you were to ask. My dad, if he thought I ever would have even won a match, he would have told you no, if you were being completely honest with you. And yet he still told me that story about him not winning a match his whole first year either, which I found out later when I was interviewing my grandpa, my dad's dad, about my book. My dad's story when he was a wrestler, I realized that whole story was a complete lie. And I based my entire life off that lie. So, I hope you guys understand, in the last few minutes here before I go and jump into the Q&A, then I want to share with you a little bit about my mountaineering journeys. But, to get to this point, where in this picture where you see here, there was a lot of other really, really bad ideas before this. Like bath towels wrapped around my arms, duct tape, oven mitts, pot holders. Like I kind of have a belief with enough like duct tape or zip ties, you can do just about anything. But, in reality, it's better to have people that know what they're doing. Like, my friends Barb and Brett, Noah and Sam that made the carbon fiber orthotics that you see down here, that was made in Phoenix. And the crampons that you see here were homegrown right here in Flag with Cotulla. I think I'd still be trying to get up this ice wall right now if it wasn't for Cotulla. I'd be sitting somewhere at the bottom of this thing. But it takes that creativity and that vision to go and get to that point. And thankfully, I've got enough friends that are delusional enough to want to come, and help and rip apart duct tape. Because, engineering the best ideas and the best solutions never, at least for me, never, ever, ever happens in isolation. It's a communal effort. Like our collective minds and the power of us being able to go and work together on ideas is so much bigger than it is on any single one of us individually, no matter how intelligent we are. It's very much a communal thing. And having the idea to go and take on Mount Kilimanjaro when I had only climbed a little 900-foot peak in Atlanta called Stone Mountain, it was a really bad idea. My friend told me that night, we climbed up Stone Mountain. It was a CrossFit competition. It took me an hour and 47 minutes. Most other people ran up it in 20 minutes. I had leather welding sleeves on the end of my arms to try to protect them. Add that to the list of really bad ideas because I realized the leather welding sleeves held up a lot better than my skin did. Tore all the skin off the ends of my arms. Not all of it, thankfully, but a lot of it. And I got to the top and I was like, man, that was really hard, but this is beautiful. And I'd been to the top before, but I'd not seen it through the eyes of having gone through that trail and suffered through it and really gotten to the top and realized and earned it my own instead of taking the tram. And it had a totally different view, totally different perspective. So that night I told my friend I wanted to go and do Mount Kilimanjaro, and she is a close friend, so she told me with a couple other words inside there, you're freaking crazy. And she, she was like, well, how do you want to do it? Kind of laughing at me a little bit. And I was like, I don't know. And as I said, those three words, I don't know, you heard in the video, those are three of the most important words of my life, and I believe three of the most important words that exist inside of science. As all discoveries are born out of I don't know. I don't know, but, but. It's a big one, because we can go and figure it out. There's always a way to figure it out. As long as we have air inside of our lungs, there's a way to go and figure that out. But it doesn't mean, even with the right equipment, even with the right gear and the right situation, and sometimes it takes all of our resolve and then some. On Kilimanjaro, up to that point, was the hardest thing I'd ever done in my life, and had the most amazing honor I've ever had of getting to carry the ashes of a fallen veteran. His name is Corey Johnson. He grew up in Phoenix. In May of 2011, he was killed in combat. I believe his wife was pregnant with their third daughter when he went on his final deployment. Had two daughters that he left behind that he knew. And his mom, I met her a few months after she had lost her son, and she said, we've been having a hard time deciding what to do with Corey's remains. And she asked me, she said, would you promise, or consider promising to bring Corey's ashes to the summit? And I promised her that I would. And in those deepest moments where I wanted to quit and give up, and there were plenty, I thought a lot about him. And the fact that he didn't have that opportunity right now to go and choose to do this mountain with his daughter someday, but I was alive and I had this chance and this choice I could go and choose. and getting to go and carry him was the single greatest honor I've ever had. And, leading up to then taking on Mount Aconcagua, they say the best mountaineers have the shortest memory, as every trip was really bad in different moments, and it's amazing in others. But on Aconcagua, nobody's ever really heard of Aconcagua unless they've climbed mountains, but we spent 4, maybe even 5 nights above the altitude of the summit of Kilimanjaro. And nearly 23,000 feet, so it's the highest peak in the world outside of the Himalaya. And this one, had some other bigger challenges, and the team at Kutula really came together, and maybe some much beefier crampons right now, which I think that they might know this, but I'm not 100% sure. The backup set that you guys made for me is still like somewhere on top of the mountain. I'm sorry about that. So, but when on the summit day, when I'm there, really the big thing that I'll always remember was there's this moment, the big realization that I had, of this is it. It was wrestling, football, all that stuff I told you growing up taught me to go and look forward, look to the future, look to the summit. Really on Kilimanjaro, I was sitting there sitting on the ice, looking back to see how far we had come. That gave me that strength to look forward. But then on Aconcagua, it was totally different. It was right here, I was so broken that summit day. And you can kind of see here, I can only see, I've got my glasses on, and at different times, and the wind was high, I'd have ski goggles on, and it created just an interesting outline that I could only see 3 feet at a time. In those toughest moments, I was moving too slow, and my friends were told to split off and go to the summit before me. I'm they're going to summit, I'm not. I'm going to ruin the after party. And then, we've spent this long, 17 days leading up to this point, all of these thoughts going through my head, negative thoughts, positive thoughts, no, be quiet, stupid, keep going, tough it out, all this stuff. And I was you know what? None of those thoughts matter, because I'm not there. I'm not at the summit yet. So it's when you're in the car yet, and you're with your parents, and you're are we there yet? You're no, you're not. Are we there yet? No. Well, if you aren't there yet, then you aren't there yet. And that was the big realization. I wasn't there yet. So right now, since I'm not there, this is the only 3 feet that I have to deal with. And then I would deal with that. I was there's another 3 feet, and I'll deal with that. Oof, dealt with that. Whew. It's 3 more feet. Got it, I'll deal with that. We kept just turning it into this game of creating that, 3 feet at a time. And then an hour and 15 minutes later, after turning that into a game, my guide told me to stop and look up. It was a couple moments before this photo was taken. He told me, look where you're at. And I was just 5, 10, 15 minutes at most away from rounding the corner and being on top of the summit with my friends. At that point, I got to take in views of the high peak of the Andes Mountains. It was breathtakingly beautiful, and, got to have my biggest, highest achievement yet, which was, the climbing season was closed in the Himalayas. At one point, we were probably the highest people in the world, which wasn't the achievement. It was really the fact that because when I have to go and strip down to use the restroom, I have to take off all my clothes mostly. So at one point, I was the highest naked guy on the planet. But physically, though, it was broken, and it literally led me to just look at that 3 feet at a time. And that's where, I think about we've talked about engineers as ourselves being engineers, talked about the profession of engineering, which is amazing and has had a huge impact on my life and every one of our lives in here. But really the last scale of engineering is to think about engineering in the world and engineering these problems that we go and face in the future, and even the problems that we can't even anticipate that we're going to go and face someday. And at that point, I think my suggestion is, my 2 cents would be that we go and we keep our focus on the summit, on the horizon, how far we've come. But in those moments when we're most broken, when we're most stressed out, we look at the 3 feet that's right in front of us, and we deal with that. And then there will be another 3 feet, and we deal with that. And for taking on something like that, I think there is no excuse, and is absolutely every single one of our responsibility. With that, it's been a great honor to be able to talk about that and share that with you guys tonight. you.